Do-do-do. And it looks like just like that, we are now officially live. Another episode of Dark Bite. So, of course, I am here with Eric LaRocca. And did I pronounce that right? Because I always want to ask you that. LaRocca, LaRocca?
Yeah, so I say LaRocca, but I think LaRocca is perfectly acceptable too. I know like a lot of my family members say LaRocca. I just have been brought up saying LaRocca, but either way is totally fine.
Cool. Well, I like LaRocca. It's got a good, hard edge sound to it too. LaRocca.
Yeah, it's like
you're
strong
making music,
sounding.
so.
Yeah, exactly.
I like it. It definitely goes with your style of books, though. Holy smokes! So, I love. It's such a pleasure to speak with you here, Eric.
Thank you.
Of course, like a lot of folks out there, they probably heard of you, but they maybe have yet to read you. I'm very fortunate that I unscrewed that particular, I guess, issue with my life recently. So, like a lot of people, I guess they probably heard of you the way that I did through your book. Things have gotten worse since we last spoke. So that's been highly acclaimed as being a viral sensation, which I think is pretty awesome title. I think everybody wants to be a viral sensation, but normally when I think of viral sensations, I think, TikTok, social media, maybe YouTube. But what does that mean when you got a book that's a viral sensation? I mean, other than maybe infecting people with the nightmares that you write about, what is a viral sensation when it comes to books?
Well, I think that term really was coined by the marketing department at Titan, and their Titan Books, which is putting out the book that you're talking about, Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke, but it's also being packaged with two other stories. So the book is called Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke and Other Misfortunes. But to answer your question, a viral sensation when it comes to books, I think of books like Bird Box that had a huge impact on they were that book was a cultural phenomenon, with the movie and just any sort of media that has that kind of the quality that just goes in, it kind of seeps into other communities and it just reaches as far as it possibly can. With Things Have Gotten Worse, there were so many people that were reading that book that weren't necessarily in the niche horror market that it was written for, and that really surprised me because I would have people telling me, I saw your book on this random app, I saw your book being reviewed by this person that has no affiliation with the horror genre. And it was really quite strange when that happened because Things Have Gotten Worse was really kind of a niche project. It was published through Weird Punk Books, which is a very small micro press based out of Minneapolis, Minnesota, and they publish a lot of really just dark, gritty, transgressive fiction. And I think the reason why Things Have Gotten Worse broke out the way it did was maybe a couple of things. It obviously was seen by the right people at the right time so that people could, have access to it and read it and formulate their own opinions. But I really do think the cover art was a big selling point. I think the original cover art really, really drew people in. And I think people were already familiar with Kim Jacobson, who did the cover art for the original edition of Things Have Gotten Worse. And I think that that cover art just really drew people in. And I also think the title really drew people in. And moreover, I think that the fact that the book was kind of promoted as this nostalgic look at interactions between two women in the early 2000s. I think nostalgia is really big, and it was really big in 2020, 2021. So I feel all of those elements kind of combined and just made the perfect storm of a book and a book release. And I think those are really the key ingredients as to why the book became such a viral hit with people. That said, like, not everybody loved the book, and that's totally fine. Like, imagine if we all liked the same things, like our world would be so boring,
Exactly. Very cookie cutter.
Yeah. So, but people had very just resolute, they just had very fixed opinions of the book. And a lot of those opinions helped the book go viral even more, because a lot of people were saying, oh, it's trauma porn, oh, it's, fetishization of queer women, and those reviewers that reviewed the book and kind of like condemned it, in a way actually helped promote the book even more. Whether they were intending to do that or not, I suspect that they weren't trying to, help promote the book. But in reality, like, negative reviews do help a book's success quite a bit. When you have reviews that are saying this is disgusting, this is horrible, like this shouldn't be read. Like, I'll never forget, like, the first 1-star review I ever got was for Things Have Gotten Worse, because it was essentially like my debut novella with like a press. Like, I had released some material independently, just like through myself, but Things Have Gotten Worse, for all intents and purposes, like, was my debut with a legitimate independent publisher. And the first negative review I ever got, like the first 1-star review, was for that book. And I remember the review said, there are no words for how disgusting this book is. And to me, I was like, that's a rave review,
100%.
That's like a review that will sell books. You'll get people. I mean, obviously, when I first got the review, I was like a little bummed, because I was like, oh, like,
sure,
a 1-star doesn't feel great.
Right.
But then when I kind of looked at it and analyzed it and really thought, really gave it some good thought, I was like, oh, this review, like, will actually help me quite a bit.
That's a blurb, the most disgusting book I've ever read.
Yeah, exactly. That is a blurb. I mean, and then there were all these other reviewers that came out and, just said that the book was like trauma porn and, fetishization and, all of these things. And those reviews, like, really made people interested and were like, oh, I really want to read this now,
Yeah.
So just to get back to answering your question, like, a viral sensation, a viral hit with a book, I think it's any sort of book that is able to reach the furthest it can outside of its intended readership. Things Have Gotten Worse was written for a specific market, like a specific readership, like the kind of niche splatterpunk transgressive fiction market. Those were the people that I had in mind when I was writing the book. And then for it to kind of blow up the way it did and move out into all of these different little niche communities in the reading community, I mean, that was unbelievable to me. But it was also like incredibly terrifying, because to be like mentioned and to be like such a big hit with readers and be talked about so much, like it is like kind of frightening. Like, going viral like is really frightening, and it kind of opens you up for a lot of abuse, unfortunately, a lot of like incorrect assessments of you as like your character, your being, like who you are.
Right.
And I mean, but that's just what comes with it. And I shouldn't say, like, I hope I'm not making this all sound like super negative, because it wasn't all negative. Like, that book, Things Have Gotten Worse, opened so many doors for me And I met some incredible people through that book, like people that read the book and then reached out to me and said, like, I'm such a fan of your work. Like, people that I don't want to like name drop or anything, but like I really, and a lot of like projects that I have coming out over the next couple of years are because of that book and the connections that I was able to make because of the success of that book.
Yeah, so talk about kicking the door down straight out of the gates. That's and yeah, that's I think that definitely goes to show that you've got a very healthy outlook on who you are, what your writing's about, how you intended to affect people by this, and that's great that you're not letting the naysayers get you down at all. Obviously, I mean, the train's been rolling ever since then with some more publications that we'll talk about in a few minutes here. But no, and of course the first thing I'm thinking about as you're talking to me about this polarizing response is, of course, how can we not think about Jack Ketchum's The Girl Next Door, where, and I think that your books are very much going to be in tune with that, certainly with Things Have Gotten Worse, is that people are going to discover this and it's going to open up threads all over again. And I think that, it's very interesting because I think a lot of the folks where they do read books like that are transgressive, that they're not accustomed to perhaps reading, maybe they're used to more literary tales, all of a sudden and I would imagine this is the point of your book, and this is certainly the point of a lot of these types of books, is that it's supposed to get a reaction of you. It's supposed to make you uncomfortable because, guess what? Outside of our cozy walls that we call home, there's a whole world of uncomfortableness out there, and we don't always have an opportunity to hide from it. Especially the people that are in those situations. And I think that when you kind of rip people's blinds open and you force them to look at these really uncomfortable situations that they're not accustomed to, they think, of course, it's the other people, it's the other things, it's disgusting, you get rid of it kind of thing, which I think is a terrible reaction for people. But you really wonder what they think about when they have a chance to reflect on that. And no doubt have to deal with now these unsettling images, these unsettling thoughts that, through your wonderful talent, you've been able to feed to them, and now they're left with these things that they're just not used to having to process.
Totally. I mean, I said this yesterday on Twitter because right now we're in the process of promoting another novella that I have coming out at the end of October called They Were Here Before Us, and it's going to be released through Bad Hand Books. And a lot of early readers have been very, I don't want to say concerned, but they've expressed some, I guess, concerns would be the only way I can describe it, saying to the editor that I've been working with, Doug Morano, who is a Bram Stoker award-winning editor. He's amazing. But they said, they've said to him, like, this book is going to upset a lot of people. Like a lot of people are going to be very, very upset by this book. And he stands by it. He stands by me. And but I said to him over Twitter, I said, the worst kind of reaction to any piece of art is indifference or apathy. 100%. If you consume any kind of media, any book, film, whatever, and your thought at the end of it was, well, it was all right, I guess it was fine, you don't really have an opinion of it, that to me, like, that's a failure. It would be a failure for me as an artist if I left you feeling, just indifferent to whatever you just read. I had failed in my capacity to tell a story that, shook you and that made you think, and that maybe disgusted you, maybe, just made you feel something. Like, that's what I try to do with any of my work. So I would rather be hated than, just be somebody that people are like indifferent about. You know what I mean? And I kind of have come to the terms with the fact that I think my work for the rest of my life is going to be very polarizing with people. And that's totally fine, because all of the great writers and great filmmakers that I absolutely love, they've been completely polarizing people themselves. I'm thinking of people like Peter Greenaway and Lars von Trier, and writers like you said, like Jack Ketchum. I mean, he was beloved in horror, but there are people that still struggle with his works and the things that he wrote about. And I think really dynamic and interesting art is polarizing. And I mean, that's kind of where I see myself existing as an artist.
And I think that's amazing, because like I know, with Jack Ketchum or Dallas Mayer, I remember he once told me, he's like, well, for as an example, if like The Girl Next Door or Red, where the dog dies in the first chapter kind of thing, he's like, well, if that pissed you off, good, it was supposed to piss you off, because if it didn't, there's probably something wrong with you.
Right.
Like you said, with apathy, I mean, God forbid you're the kind of person that could drive by a horrific accident and just speak, meh,
yeah,
just another day kind of thing. It's like, as much as I hate being behind the rubberneckers, at the same time, that's the sort of thing that probably should get a reaction out of you. Maybe after you drive by a horrific accident, go home, hug your family, be grateful they're there.
Right.
Have the talk with your kids about, don't drink and drive, or, pay attention to what's around you. I mean, these are things that are horrible things, but they do have the capacity, I think, to affect people in a positive way as well.
Totally.
And I think the same can be said for a lot of, like you said, transgressive, horror books that are really upsetting to people, but good, let's get a reaction out of you. Let's talk about this. Why does it upset you? What can you do to, hopefully create a world that you don't have to have these real life instances actually occur around you?
Right. Exactly. I mean, I think like any really excellent book will make you react in some way, and that's what I try to do when I write. I'm not trying to write like, oh, what's the sickest thing I can think of that I can write?
Sure.
I'm telling a story. I'm trying to tell a story with, real palpable human characters that will make you react and reflect on your own life and your own morals and your own views,
Yeah, and I love, it's kind of interesting. I mean, normally, I guess it's just the way it worked out, but I feel like I'm starting backwards with you, because, of course, I read your the most recent book. Well, I think it's still the most recent book. Holy crap, Eric! Since I've read "You Can Never Leave This Place," I feel like I think you've announced like 3 more books since then. And I mean, I'm like, I just read this book. Like, come on,
right.
Let me catch up here.
I know,
which is a great problem to have. So
my agent keeps telling me I need to like slow down and like not be as prolific. But I just love to write. I'm always writing. Yeah. So it's just
the cool thing too is that, and I noticed that, what is this I heard somebody say once in reflection to, the novellas and such that are coming out right now, because I think that, I don't know if it's that there's more available now, or if it's that a lot of the indie presses, are sort of catching on to this, and they're embracing the fact that a lot of folks are cool with reading shorter books. Totally. I absolutely love it. I mean, I'm so glad they're doing that. I think I heard somebody refer to them as, this is almost, if you're writing novellas, it's almost like I probably shouldn't have started talking about that, because I completely brain farted again.
Is it like the Golden Age of Novellas, you mean? Are you talking about like
it was sort of something like that. Yeah, it was almost like the Golden Age of leisure, where it's like, this is kind of the next best thing, I guess, as far as that goes, where people are just absolutely gravitating towards it. And I think it makes sense. I mean, people are busier than ever before. People want that escape, and it's nice to have that, user experience where you've got that sense of accomplishment where you can read a whole book in a day or two. It's great. Mm-hmm. And I love the fact that at least you might be cruel in your storytelling, but you're nice enough to give it to us in, relatively bite-sized pieces, so we don't feel like we really can't catch up, and you've got these big doorstopper books that we have to all, invest half our lives into reading. So I appreciate that, Eric.
It's my pleasure.
You're writing some stuff that I feel like I can catch up with. But no, I'm so glad that I read your book, and I think it was a recommendation to somebody else. And of course, with your viral sensation, I've heard of your book before, and I've heard the rave reviews. So I was very curious to check it out, and I think the fact that it was a novella, I thought, what's the worst case? I'm going to spend 2 days of my life deciding if I like this author or not, to see what all the fuss is about. I've got that time, and I'm so glad I did. And kind of going back to what we were talking about, that you a lot of times have some pretty disgusting things. You've got some very ugly truths, but I think that the transgressive aspect is really on full display in your book. We Can Never Leave This Place, because it really deals with some pretty personal stuff. At the core of all this terrible stuff that's happening, you've got these really complicated, layered, human people that are stuck in a relationship together, trying to make the most out of it. I guess whether or what you deem to be making the most out of something is obviously up for interpretation, but that's essentially what these two main characters are doing. You've got a very disturbed mother, a daughter who's at that age where her eyes are wide open. She's becoming a lot more aware of her own self, her own place in the world, and unfortunately her world is a very confined space because of what's going on outside. Because you did such an amazing job, of course, at describing what the book things are about to get worse. Where did this book start off with for you? I mean, I know there's so many different layers in this book, where you've got the relationship, you've got some monsters, you've got what I think could certainly be interpreted as a post-apocalyptic world that you've cast these people into. But where did it all start from? I mean, did you wake up one day and see giant spiders in a flooded out apartment with a dead body laying on a bed in the nursery, and then you thought that'd be a great story to tell?
Right.
Where did that, I mean, I'm not going to ask you where you got your ideas from, but where did the seed come from? Like, what was the starting point for you for this book?
Yeah, so this book really had a very unique journey that not a lot of my other books have had, in that it began essentially. So I went to Emerson College as a screenwriting major for my graduate program, and I was there for 2 years. The program was like a 2-year conservatory program, and I had to write a full-length screenplay as part of my second year curriculum. And I was kind of looking around, trying to gain inspiration from, what do I want to write about? And I knew that I wanted to write something about grief and how we process grief, and losing a loved one, and I wanted to kind of, I knew that I wanted to kind of discuss those things. And I started doing research, and I came across this really fascinating article. I forget what country it was specifically, but it was a group of people, a small society of people, that whenever they would lose a loved one in their village, they would amputate a finger or a part of a limb, and it would be a physical representation of the loss that they had experienced when they lost their loved one. It would be a permanent reminder of. So
they would amputate their fingers, you mean, or the finger of the loved one?
Of themselves. Wow. Yeah, of themselves. And I thought, wow, that's so fascinating, that's so, and that's right up my alley, because I'm a big, I love that kind of literal representation of something that's, that's more figurative, you know what I mean? Yeah. Cronenberg does a lot of stuff like that. He's one of my favorites. So, Yeah, so I did some research about this particular like village, this group that was like amputating parts of their body whenever like a person in their village passed away. And I thought it was just really interesting, and that's kind of where the seed of the story began. And I kind of developed it from there. I set it in this war-torn country. And I knew that I wanted to focus on like a young girl who was around 15 or 16, and the journey kind of just took me from there. But I wrote it as a screenplay first. And I workshopped it in class, and changed some elements, added a few more beats to the arc, certain character arcs. And after Emerson, after I graduated, I was like, oh, okay, so I can either go to LA and pursue a career in screenwriting, or I can stay on the East Coast and try to kind of make that work, but work on other projects too. And at the time, like, my fiction writing was really kind of taking off. Like, I was working a lot more on fiction, and I had met my boyfriend who lived in Boston, and I was like, I don't really want to go to LA. So I just decided I'm just going to stay in Boston and see what I can do, how I can, achieve my dreams here in Boston by not going to LA. And a year passed, and then, so I wrote the first draft of the scripts like 2018.
Okay.
And then when my fiction writing started picking up, and I was getting acceptances to like magazines, literary journals, and then eventually like Weird Punk, I was like, oh, I should adapt this screenplay as a novella, as a piece of fiction. And I just started working on it, and it pretty much follows the same sort of trajectory that the original screenplay followed. The great thing about fiction is that you can kind of editorialize more, and you can fill in the gaps, and you can describe how people feel. You can't really do that in screenwriting. It's all visual.
Yeah, exactly. A lot more narrative, and you can actually explore people's inner dialogues a lot better.
Right. So I felt like I had a good framework of the story because I had the screenplay to kind of like work from. But then I could really play with the relationship between Mara and her mother, and Mara's mother's hatred for Mara, and kind of go into more depth with just certain character beats that I wanted to like explore more. And essentially it was a very like quick writing process. I think, adapting the screenplay like to the novella form was maybe like a couple of weeks, not even.
And are they pretty similar?
They're very similar. Yeah, they're very, very similar in that they follow the same pretty much story. The original draft of the screenplay didn't include. I guess we're going to go into spoiler territory if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So if anybody doesn't want to get spoilers, now's your chance to go get a coffee, go pee, go outside, have a smoke if you got them.
All right. So now that the spoiler, we're in spoiler territory. The original draft of the screenplay didn't include the giant talking vermin. That
no
was something,
kidding. Okay.
Yeah, they were actually. I wrote them just as circus performers, as people, really extravagant characters coming into this house. And I remember workshopping it, and my professor was like, this story is interesting, but it needs like another layer to it. It needs something that something that just gives it more of an oomph, and it's hard to it's hard to receive that note, because you're like, well, what the hell can I add to it already? And then
exactly, yeah.
right. So, and then but it kind of just came to me like really organically. I don't even remember how the idea came to me, but I decided one day, I was like, what if they're all like animals? What if they're all like vermin? And I pitched it to the professor, and he was like, oh, I love that. And that's really where the big, the genesis of the story, like that's when I kind of locked it in, and I was like, this is the story I'm telling. And I knew that I wanted to keep it for the novella, because I just think it works. I think it works beautifully.
100%.
The way like Mara processes her grief and her, inability to cope with what's going on around her. It makes total sense that her trauma would force her to see home intruders as like otherworldly, like just like talking vermin. You know what I mean?
It's like a way to she's been so traumatized, it's almost like she's trying to put securities wherever she can, whether or not it's from her own delusions or not. I mean, I thought it was that was powerful, and it's such an amazing thing to hear. I'm so glad that you gave that confession, I guess, or that spoiler, because I thought that was one of the strongest portions of this book, because it was, we all love a good what do you call it, an untrusting narrative,
untrustworthy narrator.
But then it's, because I found that, because I'm like, is this really a giant spider? Is this like a supernatural kind of element to it? Is this really what's going on? Is Mara crazy? What else is being described that isn't quite as it seems? And it's just, it's like, all right, I'm sold. I'm all in. I'm all in on this one, because I have to be. And it's, but it made it so as I'm reading this, I'm constantly trying to interpret and read between the lines if there's anything else I should be picking up on. And I found if you didn't have that element, it would have been just a great book, but not quite that.
Totally. And what I hope relatable. Is, I hope people will go back and reread the book, and that have read the ending, they know the reveal. I hope they'll go back and kind of just experience the book again with knowing what they know and seeing the gradual buildup of everything. So yeah, I maybe I shouldn't have confessed that, but I just want to be honest with readers, and let them know that the writing journey, like, it's not a perfect journey, and sometimes to get from A to B you have to go to like H and then back to D and then forward a little, and it's just there's no perfect writing journey.
No, not at all. I've heard of people, sometimes they'll write the complete end of a story and then they'll write everything else to try to lead up to that point. And for them, that's the exercise, is, okay, how do I get there? I already know how it's going to end, which I think is kind of boring, but to each their own.
Right. Yeah. I mean, whatever works for you.
Yeah, no, that's exactly. So, of course, I guess the natural question of all that then, Eric, is, so you've got a screenplay for this bad boy sitting in your desk somewhere, hopefully not collecting too many spiders and vermin. You obviously have a background in screenwriting, so you know what you're doing. Do you have any cinematic plans as far as this particular story goes, or any other stories that you've been working on, you've got coming out?
Yeah, so I don't know how much I'm allowed to talk about it, but for Things Have Gotten Worse, I definitely talked about it on Twitter a little bit. We are trying to move forward with a film adaptation of that book, and things are lining up, and we're getting closer and closer every day to making a deal. and getting it greenlit and getting it into production. But that is like the major thing that I'm working on right now as far as like a film adaptation. Cool. I do have the script for this this novella, We Can Never Leave This Place. It is it's on my hard drive and on my computer. So I mean, I would love to eventually pitch it to a studio or any interested party. I have a manager who's like my film TV representation, and I don't think I've let him read it yet, but because we've been so focused on getting things have gotten worse off the ground. But I think like once we get that out of the way and we get that going in the right direction, I think we might talk about something like this being done, because I would love to see this on the screen. I would love to see it as like a claymation kind of animated film,
because then you could have the giant spiders and the giant talking cockroaches.
I'd love to see it like a snake, like Coraline almost. I'd love to see it like
that'd be super cool. So I mean, that movie Mad Dogs or Mad Gods that came out, I mean, claymation I think is back. Well, I mean, I guess that's more stop motion, but still.
Right. I'm totally game for that, and that's like probably my biggest aspiration right now. It's to get like a movie made in like animation, like claymation. So
I think that's pretty fantastic, and I'd love to see something like that too. And it's nice as well because you could have basically the same setting for most of the scenes anyways, because it all takes place in the same place, all in their apartment.
Right, exactly. It'd be like really, I mean, even if you did it like a full production that wasn't animated, it would still, well, the CGI for like the animals might be a little much, but I feel like it wouldn't be that expensive of a film to produce, but I don't know. I'll have to let my manager deal with that.
Exactly. Now, are you, and hopefully you can talk about this, are you far enough along where they're talking about directors and potentially people they can put in there, or is it more a matter of, is this feasible? How do we get the financing for this? And initial stages.
So I'm just going to tell you, like, we do have a director. Like, a director has signed on to the project. Good. And we're working together on finalizing what we want to send to other production companies. So a director has signed on. I don't know if I'm allowed to say like who it is, but
sure.
But yeah, we do have a director, and we're kind of on like a really tight deadline now with getting it out in front of people. So I'm excited. I feel really good about it, and the script is it's I say that it's better than the book, but because I feel like I've added so much more character, and like I've filled in so many blanks that were left kind of in the original novella, and I just feel really proud about the screenplay, even if it doesn't get made in the end. Like I feel like I really delivered some quality work here.
Awesome. Well, I wish you all the best with that project, and hopefully, regardless of where it goes, that we'll get a chance to maybe read the screenplay as well in some sort of a publication, or
I would love
bonus material, something like that. Like, are you going the crowdfunding route for getting the film project and maybe the future ones off of the ground, or are you hoping to go on a
No, we're definitely
traditional?
We're looking for traditional, like production companies. I don't know if I'm allowed to say like who we're in talks with, but
sure,
they're people that like I love their movies, so they're really like top tier, like independent production companies. So I'm really pleased with how everything's going.
Awesome. And of course, my curious journalistic brain is wanting to dig and ask you more details than that, but I don't want to get you into trouble. I don't want to jinx anything. I want this thing to go well and get off the ground. So
no worries.
super excited. And that's pretty awesome too. I mean, this is only your, what, third novella?
Yes,
that's published
third
so
novella.
far?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
Third
Very
novella.
cool. And then you got a couple more things coming up. I know you've got a collection of short stories that I think you announced. Well, I was going to say most recently, but that's not true. But I think that's going to be coming up next. And then you've got another novella that's coming out, what, in October, I believe?
Yep, late October. That's through Bad Hand Books. It's called They Were Here Before Us. And but prior to that, in September, I have Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke and Other Misfortunes coming out through Titan Books. And that's the original novella, Things Have Gotten Worse. And then 2 other novellas packaged with it. And these novellas
have a different cover.
Yes, a different cover. Yeah. These novellas have never been published before, so they're brand new material for people to enjoy. And then I have a little bit of a break, which is good, after those stacked book releases, and then in March.
Well, we get a break as the readers, but I'm sure you're going to be pretty busy behind the scenes.
Yeah, exactly.
No break for you.
Yeah, exactly. I'm sure I'll still be writing, but in March 2023, I've got The Trees Grew Because I Bled There, Collected Stories, which is a collection of short stories that was originally published in 2021, and it went out of print, and now it's being republished through Titan Books.
Okay, so I love your titles too. Like, they're almost little vignettes themselves. It's like it's a brand for you. These, because they're more scene descriptions than that are titles. I think that's really cool. They're very intriguing.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I love, for me, coming up with the title is like a really fun component of the writing process. And, titles are just, I think you can really capture people's imaginations and people's interest with a really compelling and dynamic, unique title, so I really try to think of, I look at a story and I think, well, what's the angle? Like, what am I really trying to say with this story, and how can I convey it through the title that I share with people?
Yeah, and it's interesting too. I guess maybe it's just the day and age that we're in as well, where we've got to deal with so many different, moving parts all the time, and trying to keep up with all the different transitions of life with social media and that. And it seems like that's the key things I know for YouTube, for example, as you're scrolling by, they always say the most important thing is the thumbnail and the title. And really, I guess books, especially now with so much stuff coming out there and so much to choose from, and competing with all the videos and all the social media, it's like that's kind of it. The thumbnail, of course, is your cover, and the title is, well, the title. Totally.
And I think that's what really captured people with the Weird Punk edition of Things Have Gotten Worse. It was something that made you stop scrolling on your feed and just like captured you for a minute, and you were like, what the hell is this? Like, I need to buy this,
like, what's going on here?
I think a lot of people are now tuned into that, and they realize that TikTok especially sells a lot of books. Like, being on that app, like, I'm not on the app, like, I don't have an account or anything, but I have some friends that are like reviewers, and they post a lot on TikTok, and some of their videos get like thousands of views. TikTok really is like the future of selling books, and
that's what I've heard. Like, I'm not practicing TikToker myself, but from what I understand, it's a great place to get in there. I mean, they've got Book Talk, I think, where it's specifically dedicated to that, just like Bookstagram, I think, like Instagram. So it's you grab onto the wave, I guess, because technology is rolling along, and there's some great tools out there for people.
For sure, absolutely.
And I know I find it interesting, Eric, that I know you've mentioned almost with every new title that you've got a new publisher that's doing that, which is kind of very interesting for me, because I find a lot of folks, especially those that are starting out, even though it feels like you've been around and doing this for a long time, it feels like you're a veteran at this. is it a conscious effort that you've chosen to have every, with so many new titles, you've got these new publishers to represent the new titles, or is that just kind of how the cookie crumbled, so to speak, or how did that come about?
That's a great question, actually, and it's something that my agent and I are trying to we're kind of moving in a direction. I'll just say this, like, my publishing schedule right now is pretty much booked through 2025, 2026 with all of the material that I have written that's just like unreleased. But we're really trying to make a conscious effort to, go in a more traditional route and publish with only kind of one publisher with like my major projects. And then if I want to do like a small indie, kind of a novella that's not going to get mainstream, that's not going to get that mainstream, market, then I'll go with like a smaller, but not like any less important publisher.
Right.
So we're kind of like working toward that right now, and I have a couple of deals that are in the process of like going through at the moment with with certain publishers. I just can't say.
Sure.
But for right now, it's kind of worked out that I have kind of one foot in like traditional publishing and then one foot in the indie horror scene. But I think a lot of really cool, interesting writers, they kind of adapt to that model really inherently. Like, I know Josh Mallerman, he does a lot, like he's published with Del Rey, like all of his major releases are through Del Rey, but he also does like limited editions and special releases through like Earthling Publications, which is a smaller indie press. So I guess I kind of see myself, going the more traditional route with like the bigger novels that I have written that are just like that aren't announced yet. And then for my smaller, like my shorter works that are like novellas that are more like transgressive and like harder to kind of maybe market to that mainstream audience, I'll go with like, publishers that I've worked with before, like Bad Hand Books or Clash Books, which are amazing. Clash is putting out my novel next June during Pride Month.
Awesome.
Yeah, so that's exciting. And they have distribution, which is really great. So like the book will be in bookstores, and it'll just be like more accessible for people to order and find on a shelf. And so that's kind of the route that we're trying to go. And like I said, my agent is telling me to kind of slow down and not overwhelm, not like saturate the market too much, because I am worried about that. Like I don't want to release too much content and then have people struggling to keep up with reading my material. So it's kind of like once 2022 is over and we hit 2023 and 2024, I think you'll kind of see like a much more like methodical and like staggered approach to my releases. And that's there's definitely a reason behind it, is what I'm trying to say.
And with regarding the releases too, like, do you find that when you're dealing with the smaller presses, especially with the shorter books and such, as opposed to say maybe more larger publication house, like, find that the rights that they purchase from you, does it tend to expire at a shorter period of time? Like, do you find that there's also maybe a shorter window with the smaller publishers, that maybe a year or two from now that you'd have a quicker opportunity to maybe repackage that book and put it back out there with a different publisher or in a collection? Does that Does that have any bearings on it? Maybe not consciously, but at the end of it.
I don't know. I actually, for my contract with Journal Stone, who put out We Can Never Leave This Place, I'm actually not sure when the cutoff for like renewal is, or like when it expires.
Okay.
And for Bad Hand Books, I'm not sure either. I haven't really like given that much thought, to be honest. I just
too busy writing.
Yeah, well, I mean, when I look at like a publisher, I look at their back catalog of who they've published and who they've worked with and who blurbs their books. And for Things Have Gotten Worse, I was so smitten with Weird Punk and like their whole aesthetic and like who they were, like what they represented, the authors they published, and I was like, that's the perfect home for this book. And then with Journal Stone, I knew that like John Horner Jacobs published something through them, and Gwendolyn Keist did, and a bunch of other like really amazing authors. And I was like, I would love to share, a press with them, like a publishing house with them. And I don't really, I think like it's almost maybe like naivete, just like not being conscious of the fact that, the rights for books at these smaller houses, like they expire maybe a little quicker than they do at like a place like Titan or Random House or Simon & Schuster.
Right. Yeah.
But that is a good point to think about too with, if any authors are listening right now, like if you publish with, a smaller press, the great thing about publishing with a smaller press, I think, is that it's a much more like intimate experience. It's much more like hands-on. I think I've picked out the cover for every book that I've had with a small press, like, with the Bad Hand book that's coming out in October, like I picked out the artist and
that's great.
commissioned them to paint this beautiful painting that, like, if you see the cover art, just like the front cover, it looks beautiful, but when you like fold the whole layout open, it looks absolutely stunning. It's just like so breathtaking. But I don't know if you get that same sort of intimacy at like a bigger publisher.
Right, yeah, most of them have their own in-house person, and it's like, here you go, this is the cover, and it's like,
exactly.
Hopefully you like it. If you don't, well, too bad, our marketing guy does.
Right, and that's exactly what happens. And for me, I knew that the first novel that I put out into the world, I know that like that's going to be like, it may not be a big hit like Things Have Gotten Worse was, but it's going to be the book that people are like, oh yeah, that was Eric's first novel. That was his debut novel. And I knew that I wanted a press that like I was going to be able to really have like not only like a professional publishing relationship with, but like a personal like, connection with. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I found that with Clash immediately. And they are like the best people to work with. They've edited the book. They've really like raised the bar with editing this book. And we've had such high standards. Like the book went through like 2 different editors. Like it's been like a major, it's been like the equivalent of editing a book with a Big 4 publisher, but just at a small publisher. You know what I mean?
That's incredible. And that's a lot of dedication on their part, and they're clearly passionate. It's not just, I mean, obviously it's a business, but it's a business that they're passionate about too, it seems like.
Totally. And we've had, we've worked with like a bunch of different cover artists on the cover, and we're still not where we want to be with the cover. And we're working with a new designer right now, and fingers crossed that we get the cover we're looking for. But they've put so much time and energy and love into this book that even if it flops, like I know that it's like so much love went into this book and so much care that any negative outcome is going to be overshadowed by the fact that it was such a pleasurable experience to work on this novel with them. So
Perfect.
yeah, it's been great. And I really encourage writers who are, dipping their toes into the horror community. I definitely think like a lot of the people that I'm like friends with now, like Paul Tremblay, like, he started out with small publishing houses, like very small indie presses. Like Stephen Graham Jones started out with, in the small indie presses, just like me. And I really feel like working with small publishers, like you get a level of love and an amount of dedication that you kind of really won't find anywhere else.
Yeah, well, I know the one trend it seems like, or I don't know if it's so much of a trend than just a natural occurrence, that a lot of the authors that I read that do publish with the small publishers is that they tend to publish multiple titles with them as well. So I think it's just proof positive that you're certainly not alone in how important that intimate relationship is, and that, I guess, in a sense, that's sense of control that you have over your own work along with that publisher. Because I see a lot of like, for example, Death Head Press is one of the ones that I'm fairly familiar with. But yeah, they've got an amazing stable of writers, but then they've got multiple titles with these particular writers as well, so that they become known, I guess, for having published certain titles with these publishers, probably because of the same reasons that you mentioned, that that once you get that great relationship, like, it's just so important that you don't want to lose that, and you continue to work with these publishers for those reasons.
To that end, I will say, though, my experience working with the folks at Titan, it has been like amazing, absolutely incredible. And I really feel like I found an editor that really believes in my work and is willing to take a risk on the more kind of out there concepts, the concepts that maybe aren't as easy to market. Yeah. And I hope that I'll be able to work with them on future projects, and it's fingers crossed, it's looking like that will be a reality. But
Good.
I don't see why there's a reason why you have to kind of pick between working with like a big publisher and the small presses. I feel like the career that I want to kind of create for myself, I would love to work with both parties as much as possible. And at the end of the day, the most important thing is like writing work that you're proud of and that people, that like editors believe in.
Absolutely. Now, do you have time for a couple more quick questions, Eric?
Yeah, of course.
Awesome. Thank you so much for all this. So we're going back then to the book that I came to know your writing through. We Can Never Leave This Place. I guess two questions I want to ask you about that is, the one is, you did mention that, of course, it's very transgressive, which I definitely got that. And I have my own opinions as to why that is. But what do you think it is that brings in folks that don't normally read things that are that provoking and that disturbing? And what do you think it is about the story that pushes through those genres and reaches a wider range of folks that maybe aren't quite ready for your writing as much as I thought they would be?
I think a lot of it has to do, honestly, with, I think, once again, the cover art. I think that cover art draws people in. And I knew when I saw that painting, I was like, this is what I want to be the cover of this book. It was a painting that I saw just on Instagram from this artist that I absolutely love, from Greece. and the painting is actually called Fever. And I was like, oh, that's perfect for this book, because the whole book is like kind of like a fever dream,
100%.
Yeah. So I think it has to do with the artwork initially that draws people in and makes people curious. But then I think, hopefully this doesn't sound conceited for me to say, but I think I think the way in which I present some of this content, I feel, makes it a little bit easier to digest, because there is a lot of care that goes into constructing each passage, each sentence, like I'm a big student of Clive Barker and like his writing, and just how beautifully poetic and just lyrical his work is. And he can write about the most vile, like disgusting, just gruesome content, but it's delivered in such a poetic and beguiling manner. There's beauty to it, and I try no matter what I'm writing to capture like a semblance of beauty in anything that I'm working on. Anything that is really grotesque and gruesome, I really try to instill like a level of just to make it complex and interesting, but also make it somewhat palatable. And I feel like when you deliver these kind of gruesome scenes to people, but you present it in a really poetic and lyrical way, I feel like people are not as easy to just dismiss it and, say, oh, I'm going to DNF this book. Like I can't get into it. It's too much for me. I think people are really compelled by, beautiful, really intricate sentences, and I think it compels them to read further. And I really hope that doesn't sound conceited or anything, but
not at all. No, I got the same from it.
Yeah, I mean, I've read so much of Barker and Michael McDowell, who's another like openly gay author, and he like his work also is in the same vein as Barker, where he just writes about very gruesome, grotesque things, like the horrors of humanity. But he presents it in a really palatable and just beautiful way. And I think that like reading, I would say like my writing is really influenced by 3 writers, and it's Clive Barker, Michael McDowell, and actually Tennessee Williams. I haven't read Tennessee. Yeah, Tennessee Williams, for those who don't know, like he was an American playwright in like the 40s and 50s. He had like a lot of Broadway hits, like The Glass Menagerie, A Streetcar Named Desire, Night of the Iguana, Summer and Smoke. Like he had hit after hit. And his writing, he writes a lot of like Southern Gothic and like very, but his language is just so poetic and so like just decadent, and that really captured me from a young age. Like he was one of the first writers that I was like, I want to be a writer because of reading this. You know what I mean?
That's amazing.
And that I think that's where I draw like a lot of my inspiration from, is like those 3 writers. And I've noticed that all 3 writers present really shocking things, but they do so in a really palatable, beautiful way. And I try to replicate that in my own work.
Yeah, and 100%, because then I think a lot of, at least for me, the beautiful aspect of it, and certainly with Barker, there's another newish, I guess, writer as well from Australia, Aaron Dries. I've been reading some of his stuff too, and I find his
I know
very
Aaron.
Very similar. Yeah, great dude, great writer. And I find that some of the connective tissues to the style of writing is that, at least my takeaway from it was, I'm reading these horrible things. I mean, this dead guy is getting cut up and basically being consumed, and you've got these giant monsters, and you've got this horrible environment. But I think the beauty is kind of in the understanding of it all. It's in the the transitions of, okay, well, what do they do about it? I mean, obviously, you've got these two people like Mara and her mother that are really at like kind of opposite ends of that particular spectrum, where the mother is kind of she's got this her own deluded understanding of the world around her that she's trying to just simply survive in, the same as you would see maybe a rat survive on a board in the middle of like this turbulent water kind of thing, and she's almost losing her mind in the process of it and becoming this sort of insanity. Whereas you've got Mara, where she's certainly, her eyes are just becoming a lot wider and she's a lot more aware of it, but then she's also grabbing onto other things such as these giant monsters, and she's kind of creating her own reality out of it. And there's this sort of a beauty about that as far as the tactics that she's trying to use to simply not just survive this world, but trying to make it, like, to use your phrase, to make it more palatable for her, and as a way to escape it and to navigate around it, as opposed to the mother that's just kind of losing her mind, and she's just kind of avoiding these the more of the horrible underbellies of these things that are happening to her, where the daughter is trying to gravitate to it in a relatable, palatable way. And I think that people reading this, at least my take on that, is that we know these people, we've certainly seen these two impressions of people. Then it's up to us, I think, to kind of weigh out, well, what can we understand from this version of it, and what can we understand, or not this version, but what can we understand from this perspective of it through Mara? What can we take away and understand from this perspective from the mother? And I think that there's just a lot of like these horrible things that are happening on both ends of these. We can take a lot of beauty from it, I think, as far as our understanding from it and what we can do with it and what we want to do with it. And yeah, I think it's maybe I've gone off the rails and how I'm trying, and my takeaway from that, but that's kind of what my takeaway is from it, is you've got this beauty and understanding of it, and how we can come to understand both sides of that perspective.
I love that, and that's that's a very astute way of looking at it, and I'm really glad that the piece resonated with you, because I feel like the book, the way it's written, I feel like people will react to it one of two ways. They'll either completely shut it out and just be like, I don't understand this isn't for me, whatever. And then the other reaction to it will be them accepting it and just going along for the ride, and understanding the beauty in it. But once again, it comes back to that idea of like polarizing fiction, and how boring would it be, like I said before, if we all liked the same things, and if we all had the same reaction to books and film and movies. Like really exceptional art is always going to be polarizing between people and start conversations,
as it should. 100%. I think that the more people are talking about this, whether they loved it or they hated it, it's important to get those discussions going. And I just want to throw this out there too, Eric, I hope you don't mind, for everybody watching this, and even if you kind of watch through the spoilers and you think, oh, this book is ruined, I know what to expect from it, believe me, as horrific as some of these things are that are happening in this book, you've got no idea. I mean, you put a few sledgehammers of plot twists in there, especially regarding the relationships and with the mother and the father, that very slowly unravels throughout the story as the mother's brain unravels, and as the awareness of Mara, the daughter, kind of unravels. A lot more realizations definitely get revealed that really makes it easier to sympathize with both of these characters one way or the other, whether you agree with them or not. I think there's there certainly does come a point where you're like, oh well, yeah, I can kind of see why the mother's losing her mind, right? I can kind of see why Amara's gravitating to trying to create this sort of perspective for herself so that she can survive in this world and make it beautiful or livable and palatable for her. I get it. Like, some of the reveals in the story are something else.
Wow, thank you. I'm really glad you said that. Thank you.
Yeah, no, my pleasure. So anybody that thinks they just got the whole book ruined for them if they were silly and they didn't go for that pee break or smoke them if they got them and they watched it all, trust me, yeah, you guys are in for a treat. So, and with all that in mind, Eric, so I guess the kind of in parting of this, then, is there anything in particular that you want to say that you are hoping that people do walk away, not just with We Can Never Leave This Place, which is the latest publication you've come out, but with some of the other publications that are coming up? Is there any particular thing that you can put your finger on and say, that's what I want people to walk away from feeling or thinking about your particular brand of work?
That's a great question. I think it varies, obviously depending on the book, like what I'm talking about, what I hope people will walk away from. At the end of the day, I've realized that it's not my place at all to instill in people, I want you to think about this. I want you to react this way. I want you to think of me like this when you think of me as a writer. Like, people will have their impressions of you. They're entitled to their opinions of you. And all I can do is present myself in such a way that, I know my truth, and I know who I am as a writer and what I want to be as a writer. So I'm just so grateful that people are reading my work in just at the very least. Like, that to me is a win. So anything else, any other conversations that the book sparks, any other maybe controversies that the book sparks, like those are all just like, the cherry on top. Like, for me, I just am grateful that people are reading the words that I put down on paper. And I just can't thank people enough for letting me into their mind and sharing a little bit of time with me. So that I think I want people more than anything to know how grateful I am that they're reading my work.
Perfect. Well, thank you. I know I'm certainly grateful for having read your work, and I'm certainly looking forward to going through the rest of your library as well, so I can get caught up and get ready for that novella, or for that novel rather, that's coming out, as well as your collection. I'm really looking forward to that. I think that's going to be looking forward to some nightmare-infused sleepless nights. So thank you in advance for the ones yet to come. So
my pleasure.
And one last question, if you don't mind, which might be the most important question that I could think of to ask you, is, the entire time I've been chatting with you, I've been trying to look down as well. What is that shirt? What's the design on your shirt? So it looks kind of familiar, but okay.
Yeah, it's Carrie.
Very cool. Okay.
Yeah, it's Rucking Fountain. They're a brand that does like Japanese kind of styled posters from like horror films, and maybe you can see more.
Cool. Yeah, I wasn't sure if that was a kanji or if that was like a hashtag on the like a shirt, your right hand side. So I wasn't sure.
Yeah. No, it's Carrie.
And I'm like, I know those eyes, but I'm not sure. So I was curious to see the rest of it. So thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much again, Eric. This has been a tremendous pleasure. I can't thank you enough for all of this.
Oh, thank you. It's seriously been such an honor. So thank you so much.